Hello and welcome back to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing with myself, Dom Short and Scott Wilson. And I think we're about 72 hours or so after we promised we were going to be back with our last one. We said we were going to do one on Monday night after the deadline. But the deadline was 7 o'clock. We were both still sat here at 11 o'clock. I think when I looked, we got 10 press releases through after the deadline with deals that had gone through.
When's a deadline, not a deadline?
It ended up being a bonkers final few hours, didn't it, Scott?
It did. I mean, to be fair to Sunderland, we knew the big ones, but obviously the Triori deal came from nowhere, really. And that was one that absolutely went to the wire. So there was still the issue of that, whether that was going to go through or not. And then, as you say, the exits, many of the fringe ones which we were anticipating, don't get me wrong, but they obviously dripped out after the window closed. Some of them 24 hours after the window closed. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was the gift that kept on giving this transfer window, wasn't it? Goodness me.
There's plenty. I mean, we'll talk about the window in general. There's plenty of the fringe exits that, with respect, really, we've got more pressing things to talk about. But one that we do want to talk about is Pat Roberts, obviously going to Birmingham. So we'll get to that. But let's talk about the incomings first. And let's talk Triori first, because that's the one, really. Gertruda and Brobby, it was pretty clear early doors on Monday. You wrote early doors on Monday, didn't you, that it was going to happen?
Yeah.
Gertruda definitely. Brobby looked extremely likely. The Triori one was on and off, even until the last hour or two, really, wasn't it?
It was. And we'll get to the fact that a few of us went up and spoke to Kristjaan Speakman the day after the window. We'll get to that in a minute. But one of the things we did ask him about was Triori and just how that deal came about. What was the thinking behind it? Speakman basically said that, heading into deadline day, they had two key priorities. One was the defender, one was a forward, off the back of the GUI situation going back. So that was the absolute priority. Once it became clear that Gertruda and Brobby were going to happen, then it was a case of, okay, well, is there any kind of bonus deal, if you like, that might appeal to us here? By that stage, they'd agreed to Pat Roberts going out to Birmingham. Now, I think had Roberts gone and not been replaced, Sunderland would have been okay with that. But once Roberts was leaving, the ideal then was to get another wide player. And they wanted another wide player all the way through. We know that the Armand Loriente stuff would have happened had it not collapsed right at the last minute. So there was a desire always to bring in a wide player. That strengthened when Roberts left. And it was really a case of, in the negotiations with Ajax over Brobby, Triori, who they had been interested in various points over the summer, became clear that A, he was still available, and B, he'd be interested in joining Sunderland, even if it came at the absolute last minute. Now, had that been, Sunderland were going to pay a big sum for Loriente, weren't they? Had you been talking about a £20 million deal, I'm not sure Sunderland would have rushed that through in the limited time that they had. I think the fact that Triori, $2.5 million there or thereabouts, relatively short-term contract in terms of what Sunderland have been handing out to everybody else, I think that made it much more appealing to Sunderland to try and push that one through. Not that it was a shot to nothing, not that it was no risk. He's a player that they know all about because he's been on their radar all summer. So it's not like they just plucked a name from nowhere. But I think the fact that it was, if you like, a bonus deal, and a bonus deal that wasn't, 10, 15, 20 million, I think that made them keener to do it. I think my understanding is maybe it's about 10 minutes before the deadline, they got the final green light that everything had gone through and everything had been done. So it was that close. But it's done. And for that kind of price, he's got the potential to be a really exciting player. Came through at Chelsea, obviously has had the spell in England as well with Villa. Hasn't probably worked out anywhere for him as it might have looked. But there's been various stages in his career where he's been, a very highly valued, very highly rated player. If Sunderland can get him back to anything like that, then he could be a really good addition.
Low risk, high reward, isn't it? When
Correct.
The
Correct,
fee,
absolutely,
the contract. But Brobby is an eye-catching signing in a summer of eye-catching signings, isn't it?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. And the simple reality of the matter is that Gooey wouldn't have been going back to Chelsea had Sunderland not been confident that the Brobby deal was there.
I mean, you said that early doors, didn't you?
Yeah.
That will only happen if Sunderland were bringing someone.
You know, again, when we were speaking to Kristjaan Speakman, he said, look, when Chelsea came to us with the proposal, there's clearly a financial element to that proposal, which, to be fair, Sunderland and Chelsea haven't disclosed that, you know, they don't have to do that. But there will have been a financial gain for Sunderland there. There's the gain of keeping Chelsea sweet, which Kristjaan Speakman was pretty open and honest about. That, look, you know, we'd ideally look to do business with Chelsea potentially further down the line, whether that be signing players off them, whether that be loaning players off them. You know, we don't want to burn our bridges there.
Well, it was the same with Liverpool and Jadon Danns.
It was the same with Liverpool and Jadon Danns, absolutely, yeah. And the player himself has said, look, you know, I'm happy staying at Sunderland. I'm not agitating to be away, but I want to play for Chelsea. My long-term aim is to play for Chelsea. If you're saying to me there's a chance to go back now and there's a realistic chance you'll play football for Chelsea between now and January, which is what Chelsea was saying to him, then, yeah, that's something I'd be interested in. So that's Sunderland's position. But had Sunderland not been able to bring another forward in, and not just any forward, again, a forward that they had been looking at all summer, they knew all about, they'd already done the checks with, they'd already done the what's his character like, they'd already done how would he fit in the team, they'd already looked at how were his wages going to fit. All of that had already been done. So had they been starting from scratch with someone and basically just had a blank sheet, they wouldn't have done Gooey back to Chelsea. They would have said, look, we would like to help you out here, but I'm really sorry we can't. As it was, they've looked at Brobby and said, that's a deal that we'd like to do. Now, have Sunderland looked at Gooey in training and in games over the first month of the season and thought, do you know what? Maybe Brobby's a better all-round bet. Yeah, quite possibly. But like I said, the fact that that deal was there and was available to them drove the decision over Mark Gooey.
He looks a big old fella, doesn't he, Brobby?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean,
alongside him.
Again, you know, different to Triori, but a player who, again, at various stages of his career has been the next big thing in the Eredivisie, in European football to a degree.
You only have to search his name
where it hasn't worked for him. You know, so let's see how that one works out. If Sunderland can get the player, like I say, that at various stages he's been touted as, then that could be an absolutely massive signing. But there have been periods during his career as well when he's not been able to get in the Ajax team. Let's not be about it. So how he develops and what Regis Lebris can do with him and how he's going to be used is going to be really, really interesting to see how it plays out. But what you would see is Mayenda, Isidore, Brobby feels like a front three that, you know, with any kind of fair luck with injury, should give Sunderland a fighting chance of doing what they want to do.
And Gertruda then, so we know that Sunderland were desperate to sign a centre-half. We know they were desperate to sign Jean Lacumi, but they did have other options. They didn't just back themselves into that one corner with Lacumi, did they? And Gertruda brings high-level experience, doesn't he? Yeah. High-level quality and versatility as well, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, and an ability to play it right back, because I think when we've been talking, we'd said, you know, where's the one area where Sunderland might be leaving themselves a little bit short? Well, what happens if something happens to Trey Hume? That's been addressed now, but it's also been addressed at the same time as Sunderland have been able to address their centre-half issue. Now, don't get me wrong, you know, Sunderland are disappointed they've missed out on Lacumi. He was the number one target. They spent a large chunk of the summer going for him. In the end, Bologna stuck to their guns. They had said, you know, that's not a deal that we want to do. And in the end, they didn't do it. So then, you know, once that became clear, then in the final couple of the days of the window, okay, well, where are we going next? Gertruda was Sunderland's next option. And to be fair to them, they got that deal over the line pretty quickly, didn't they? By the deadline day, it was, you know, all the noises coming out of Germany, coming out of Holland, were that deal's done, it's going to happen, and sure enough, it did.
Exits then. So Pat
Yeah.
Roberts is the high profile one, and sadness. I think the
Yeah,
overriding
I think a lot of Sunderland fans have felt that in the last few days, and it's not. Listen,
acceptance and understanding,
exactly that.
but also sadness.
Yeah, exactly that. You know, football is a hard-headed business. There's no getting away from that. Players know that. You know, they're not blind to that. They know how the world works, but there is a disappointment, I think, that Pat Roberts is now not going to be playing for Sunderland in the Premier League. In the same way that I think there's a bit of disappointment as well that we're probably not going to see an awful lot of Anthony Patterson, maybe Dennis Serkin, maybe Dan Neil, maybe Chris Rigg. We are going to see those players. I think Rigg in particular will have a more prominent role than we've seen him so far pretty quickly, I would have thought. But I think, you know, there's understanding why it's happened. There's massive excitement about the squad Sunderland have got now. They had to improve the squad that got them promoted. There was no getting away from that. They've done far more, and I think far better business than even the most ardent of Sunderland fans would have been hoping for at the start of the window. But that still doesn't mean there can't be a little tinge of disappointment that the players that got them there, the players that were at the absolute heart of all the good things, all the great days that Sunderland have had, in last season, even at times in the season before under Mowbray, there is a sadness that they're not going to get that chance in the Premier League. And I think that's the sadness with Roberts. Now, you know, we move on. Pat Roberts will move on. I think, you know, there's every chance he'll have a great season with Birmingham. They look like a side who are going to be up there challenging for promotion again. I'm sure he'll tear up the Championship. You know, I'm sure he'll be a massive part of that football club and what they're hoping to do. But yeah, I think there is a bit of it. It just feels a shame, doesn't it? That having, you know, I mean, if Patrick Roberts doesn't score that goal at Hillsborough, quite possibly everything's totally different. If Anthony Patterson doesn't claw away that really early header at Wembley, there's every chance everything's completely different. So, you know, it absolutely shouldn't be forgotten what those players did to get Sunderland to where they are now.
And Roberts played through injury at Wembley.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
he was
absolutely.
around, wasn't he? Tore his calf. We spoke to him afterwards, and as you said,
I mean, he helped change the game in the final.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. And as you were saying, that I think you can be excited about the squad Sunderland have assembled, but sad about the fact that the really likable team and squad that got them up last season has been pulled apart, really, and that's the reality of it. Now, the suggestions are, our understanding is that at the start of the summer, well, even as recently as a month or so ago, Roberts was very much of the mind that he wanted to stay and fight for his place. But I think as the summer and the window progressed, it became increasingly obvious that he just wasn't going to get opportunities. And he's not, this isn't Chris Rigg, where he will just benefit so much from a year of being around the Premier League and learning from Granit Xhaka and the likes. What's Roberts, 28? He needs to be playing now, doesn't he?
He's in a totally different.
I think Birmingham's a really good move for him. And you do just wonder whether Tony Mowbray is still extremely well liked at Birmingham, got strong contacts there from his short stint as manager there. You wonder whether he's gone in and had a word, don't you, and said,
quite possible.
Mogger loves Pat Roberts.
It's absolutely quite possible.
And Niall Huggins, another loanee, Niall Huggins, Wickham. I mean, if Niall Huggins stays fit and plays, he is going to be streets ahead of League One with respect to League One, isn't he? And Wickham are 22nd in League One. They've had a pretty rotten start under Mike Dodds. But I guess whatever level it is, the most important thing for Huggins is to play, for his body to become accustomed to week in, week out, regular football, train every day, games on a Tuesday and a Saturday. That goes well. Then whether it's at Sunderland or elsewhere, Huggins will be ready to kick on next summer at a higher level than League One. But the immediate priority is playing football, isn't it? And a manager knows, likes him.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think there was surprise when that deal was announced. Certainly on my social media feed, I think we all were that. You know, it felt like he could have got a move at a higher level than that. But as you say, I think the most important thing for Huggins now is to be in an environment he feels comfortable with, and clearly he knows Mike Dodds really well. Clearly, he's got a good relationship there, and just stay fit and play football, like you say, and then get his career back on track. Show that he can be durable. Show that he can withstand the rigors of, like you say, match training. couple of games a week. You know, can his body withstand that? Then Sunderland can reassess. And so, you know, to a degree, I don't think it really matters what level he's playing at. It's just, can his body withstand that? And then Sunderland can get him back, look at where he's at, and map out how they see him developing. Because, you know, of all the fringe players that have left or are leaving, can any of them realistically be of use to Sunderland in the Premier League in the next 2-3 years if Sunderland successfully establish themselves as a Premier League team? Huggins is probably the one who potentially could be.
Yeah. You mentioned it a couple of times. You went up to the academy on Tuesday to speak to Kristjaan Speakman after the transfer window closed, and you've mentioned it there in reference to the signings on deadline day and some of the exits. But what did he have to say about the window and Sunderland's strategy throughout the summer more generally?
Yeah, I think that was the key message that he was wanting to get over, and that we were digging around really. That you know, Sunderland have spent a lot of money this summer. You know, there's various disputes over quite how much, and is it the most ever spent by a promoted team? Where do they stand in terms of what the rest of the Premier League spent this summer? You can argue that till the cows come home, because how much does a deal cost? Do you include add-ons? Do you not include add-ons? What's the conversion rate from euros to pounds? All of that. So whatever way you add it up, Sunderland have spent more than 150 million. If you include all potential add-ons on that, you're creeping towards 200 million. That is a massive, massive expenditure. But what Kristjaan Speakman was really pained to point out was, look, this isn't panic buying. This isn't knee-jerk. This is very much strategically thought out. Whatever happens to Sunderland this season, we are comfortable with the financial position we're in. If it goes brilliantly and Sunderland want to carry on reinvesting in future windows, then he is confident that with a bit of sensible dealing in and around it, the PSR headroom and scope is still there. Now, clearly, the PSR position has changed massively because of the money that's been spent this window. But Sunderland did have real scope to be able to do that, because they'd barely spent in the Championship, and they've sold Ross Stewart, Jack Clark, Joe Bellingham, Tommy Watson, all of that money, all of that. And, you know, in a lot of those cases, either pure profit or massive profit has enabled them to spend this money. And then the other element of that is, you know, he's done what he said when we spoke to him at the start of the summer, really, which is, yes, there'll be an odd exception to the rule, Granit Xhaka, Ronaldo, but in the main, Sunderland will be spending money on players that they think have a very high ceiling of where they could potentially develop to, and are at the age and have the profile where there will be a sell-on value in those players. And there is absolute confidence within Sunderland that no matter what happens in terms of where the team finishes, what league they're in next year, or anything like that, that they have got a squad that is asset rich and will be worth more money further down the line than it's worth now, because they're confident that a number of the players that they've signed this summer, you know, will develop and be sold. Now, you know, there'll be some that won't, and there's been some that won't in the previous model. We've seen the scrambling around to try and get rid of Rusin, get rid of Bart. You know, not every player works, but if you get more right than you get wrong, if you get 2 or 3 gems like a Bellingham that goes from there to absolutely there, then, you know, the model is kind of self-sustaining then, isn't it? And that's the belief within Sunderland. So yes, we've spent a lot of money. Yes, we've probably spent more money than people were anticipating, but we've done it strategically. We've done it because we had to, and we've done it in a way that we're confident will not jeopardize the future progress of the club. And ultimately, that's all you can ask of them, isn't it? The proof will be in the pudding, let's see. But that's all you can ask of them, really.
A number of Sunderland signings will be away in December and January for the African Cup of Nations. It's been a talking point throughout the summer. So I'll just run through the players who are very likely to be away. Habib Diarra, Senegal, Reinildo, Mozambique, Adingra, Ivory Coast, Masuaku and Siddiqui, both Democratic Republic of Congo, Talbi, Morocco, Bertrand Triori, Burkina Faso, and then a couple of others, not signings, but players, Ahmed Abdullahi, Nigeria potentially, and Blondie, Cameroon. What's the feeling there then? Because clearly it's not ideal. Well, again, just to run through the games. So the African Cup of Nations runs from December the 21st to January the 18th. Well, players are going to link up with their squads in advance, clearly. And Sunderland plays Newcastle 8 days before the tournament starts. So the chances are some players are going to be missing for that one. And then the games after that, Brighton, Leeds, Man City, Tottenham, Brentford, Crystal Palace. Well, they're not going to miss all of them because obviously for all the players, the tournament isn't going to stretch right until the end. But that's obviously hardly ideal. But what's the feeling inside the club on that?
So I think firstly they'll be trying to keep the squad intact for the Newcastle game. I think they will be pushing with national associations as hard as they possibly can that the departure date is straight after that. But then you're right. You're talking about the bulk of a month where and a busy month where players, a big chunk of the squad are not going to be around. We said that, we talked to Kristjaan Speakman about that. And I think, well, his view on it is this. It's, look, is it ideal? No, it's not ideal. Clearly, ideally, you'd want to have your whole squad together. But ultimately, we felt that those players represented the best value on the market for players in the positions that we wanted to strengthen and with the profiles that we wanted to be targeting. We felt that they're the right players. So if they're the right players, do you accept that they come with the downside that for a month they're not going to be available, but for 8 months they are? Or do you say, well, okay, what we'll do then is we'll sign a couple of African players, but we'll make that the limit, and so we won't consider any of the others, and we'll go for players who actually we don't think are quite as good or don't think offer as much value. And he was like, well, no. These players have been signed for the long term. A lot of them are on 5-6 year deals, 4, 5, 6 year deals anyway. Is it an issue that they're going to miss 1 month? It's a disappointment. We're going to have to work around it. We know that. Regis Lebris knows that. But that for them was not going to prevent them from signing the players that they think are the right players. Now, again, we'll only really know come the end of the season, won't we, whether what happens in that month makes or breaks Sunderland's season. Internally, clearly, the hope is that it won't. And the hope is that the long-term value of having these players far outweighs the fact that they're going to miss 4 or 5 Premier League games potentially.
I think the other big talking point to come from the chat was Sirkin and Neil and their contract situations. They're into their last year of the contract now. Neil obviously hasn't started a Premier League game so far, has lost his place in the team. Dennis Sirkin hasn't played at all, hasn't featured throughout pre-season because of injury. The hope is he's going to be back after the break, but he's now got the competition, Reinildo and various other options who can play at left back, Artem Masuaku, obviously. The contracts are up at the end of the season. Where do we stand with that? What are they likely to sign extensions? What do they want to sign extensions? Does Sunderland still have high hopes for them long term? What's the feeling on it generally?
So I think the feeling is clearly that in an ideal world, Sunderland would like to get them on new deals because it safeguards the club, it gets rid of the issue. Now, are Dan Neil and Dennis Sirkin in a different situation now than they were at the start of the summer? Well, they are, aren't they? There's just no doubting that, is Dennis Sirkin first choice left back? Almost certainly not. Is Dan Neil first choice central midfielder? Well, we know he's not. So their position has changed. So, what they can realistically demand and expect in terms of what is in that contract is going to be interesting because it feels like negotiating wise, yes, the clock's ticking, but they're actually probably in a weaker position in terms of where they stand in the squad now than they previously were. And I think the other thing that is an interesting dynamic in this is when we were talking about it at the start of the summer, we were thinking that there could be a queue of clubs throwing a load of money at Sunderland for Dan Neil and Dennis Serkin. Well, that just didn't happen. You know, that yes, there was interest in them. Yes, there was a degree of talking around them, but Sunderland did not spend the summer turning down offers for Dan Neil or Dennis Serkin. So that's got to be factored into the thinking as well. So Sunderland want to have contract talks. They want to get them tied down because it solves the problem. But are those negotiations going to be different now than they might have been right at the start of the summer? Yeah, probably, because I think they are. Both of those players are in different positions now.
Just finally, then, to wrap up, where, and I know we touched on this on Monday, but obviously that was before the final business was wrapped up. Where are we at now in terms of expectations this season, hopes this season? Where are you at now compared to where you were at back in May? After Sunderland had just won promotion, what you know what, and as we talk, actually, here I've just seen Labrise has been nominated for Manager of the Month for the first month of the season, which says everything, really, doesn't it? But yeah, we'd still snap your hand off a 17th, wouldn't we, this season?
I mean, what you'd say is Sunderland have given themselves every chance of survival, and that's all you could really have asked for from the summer, isn't it? Let's be absolutely brutally honest. In the immediate aftermath of promotion, the hope would be that they have a go at this, wasn't it? Let's have a go at it. Let's not go wondering. Let's not have a right go at establishing ourselves in the Premier League and giving ourselves the best chance of survival. Well, they've done that. They've absolutely done that. They've started the season really, really well. There is a real positivity and excitement around the place. What does the rest of the Premier League look like? Well, some of the clubs that started badly are showing signs of life. West Ham obviously getting that win. Some of them have done decent business in the last few days of the window. But I still think you look at that Premier League now and think, well, are Sunderland markedly worse than all bar two other clubs? Are they one of the three worst clubs in this league? I don't think they are, no. I don't think the Sunderland team is one of the three worst teams in the league. Now, that's not to say they can't still end up in the bottom three. Of course they can. And there's going to be twists and turns and all of this. But I think if you look at Sunderland's team, look at the depth in Sunderland's squad, just as importantly, I don't think they're one of the three worst teams in the league. I really don't. And I know we've got our Sunderland hats on and all of that. Yeah, I take that. But I just don't. So do I feel more optimistic and confident about Sunderland surviving now than I did the day after they'd won at Wembley? Absolutely, I do. Yeah, because I think the business has been really good. I think that, you look at that squad now and it's just hard to see areas of real obvious weakness. So yeah, I am. I absolutely am more optimistic about it. Now, I joke there. That still doesn't mean we're looking all right. Well, all of a sudden now, suddenly going to finish top half. They might do. But I think that the ambition, any club in year one, back in the Premier League, the be-all and end-all is surviving. And that remains the be-all and end-all for Sunderland this season.
You kick on.
And then you've got the chance to build again, all of that. You become established, all of that. I go back to, I'm more confident about it now than I was at the start of the summer. Yeah, absolutely I am.
Yeah, I think everyone is, aren't they? I think there's clearly question marks. There's clearly question marks about how is this team going to adjust when there's bumps in the road? Is Labrise going to be able to maintain that incredibly strong dressing room unity and togetherness that powered Sunderland to promotion last season? These are all questions that will only be answered with time. But judging it purely on what we can judge it on, which is the quality of the players they've signed and what we've seen so far, 6 points out of 9 should have probably been more, shouldn't it? Really, I know you could, Brentford will argue they should have left the Stadium of Light with something on Saturday. So I know you can spin it like that, but Sunderland leave Burnley, don't they? Thinking if my ender scores that, we don't totally leave the game.
Yeah.
Anyhow, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support over the course of the transfer window. We are running our latest offer at the Echo, which is just £3 for 3 months of coverage, which will see you right through to almost through to the start of the African Cup of Nations.
Yeah, nearly.
There'll be plenty of talking points coming up to that. Keep your eyes peeled on the Echo site and on We Are Sunderland over the course of the next few days, because there's still plenty more to come from that chat with Kristjaan Speakman that talked about, including the summer arrival of Florent Gazolfi and how the dynamics are working behind the scenes there, which is fascinating stuff as well. Thanks to our sponsors, the Fans Museum, Cospex Opticians. Thanks for you for watching and listening, and we'll be back next week on We Are Sunderland. Take care.